It's always nice to be at Rotary. Fine people. My daughter Laura graduated from Bowling Green, her master's, and became a speech pathologist in the schools. Got married, had 2 children. After the second child, she became very ill, and she's going to tell you today a little bit about her journey to becoming a heart recipient.
All right, my dad roped me into this, so that'll tight with me. But it was in 2009 I had my daughter, and everything was fine with her. And then in about a year and a half later, we decided to have another child. And when I was pregnant with him, everything was fine. But then we had him in 2012, in January. And as soon as I left the hospital, I never felt good. And it just progressively got worse. It was about 3 months after I had him, so in April, I couldn't walk up the stairs. I was sick, I was throwing up. And then I think it was the end of April, my husband was like, you got to go to the doctor, figure something out. So I went to the doctor, and they said it was my gallbladder. And they went in to remove my gallbladder because it was inflamed, but it stemmed from my heart failing, but they didn't know. So they went in to have my gallbladder removed, and during that surgery I went into cardiac shock, but they thought it was just a reaction to the anesthesia that I was given, but they transported me to Toledo. And then in Toledo, that's where they diagnosed me with what's called, I never heard of it before because it's very rare, it's called postpartum cardiomyopathy, which is basically a type of heart failure that stems from pregnancy. Like you have no prior history of heart problems, but something during the pregnancy triggers your heart to go into failure. And it just progressively gets worse. Sometimes it happens at the end of pregnancy, and sometimes it happens after you deliver, and mine was after I delivered. So they put in, at this point, by the time they figured this out, my heart was only working 7 to 10%. And so they put in a heart pump to stabilize me enough, because they knew at Toledo they needed to get me somewhere else that specialized in hearts. So they put in a heart pump and then life-flighted me to Cleveland Clinic, where I stayed. I was there for, I think, almost just shy of 7 weeks. And they tried to recover my heart, which 50% of women that have this postpartum cardiomyopathy, they can recover their heart. They just maybe will be on medication for the rest of their life, and they're told just no more pregnancies. So that's what they tried to do. They removed the pump that Toledo put in and put in another short-term pump, trying to just give my heart some rest so I could go home. But after 2 pumps, it wasn't working, so they put in what's called an LVAD. The next one. So this is what I had. I had this LVAD it stands for left ventricular assist device, which I was hooked to for, like I said, for 18 months I had this, and it was something I was hooked to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You never unplug with it. The 2 black things on the side were batteries, which I had 4 sets of batteries because I had to change them throughout the day and then recharge them. So it was batteries on the side, which the batteries then went into the controller that you see at the bottom. And then that controller sent a cord and went in through my stomach and went up to my heart, and then connected into my heart. And then there's a little thing at the bottom of the heart where it's that's called the cannula, and that spun 9,000 times a minute just to pump the blood for me. So that was initially, it was extremely painful because that spinning, that 9,000 times a minute, spun on my ribs. And eventually, it took a few weeks that eventually kind of grew into then my ribs, and then I didn't feel it. But I had that for 18 months, and they had said, okay, when I left the hospital after that 7 weeks, they said, okay, you're going to have this for 6 months, and hopefully at that 6 months mark, you will come in, and I was going in between those 6 months, but at 6 months they were going to do testing on my heart, and then hopefully it would be recovered enough. They wanted to get it up to 30%. They said if I got up to 30%, they could remove it, and I could hopefully then go on the medication and then be fine. Well, 6 months came, and my heart was still at that 7 to 10%. And so they said, okay, maybe your heart just needs a year. So I went through a year, and I was 27 when I'd gotten this. So I went a year with that, and at the year mark, they tested it, and it still had not recovered. It hadn't changed at all. And that's the point where he said, okay, you'll eventually need a heart transplant. But he said, okay, I was 28 at the time, and he said, I want you to keep this until you are 30. And then once you turn 30, we'll talk about then transplanting. Just because with transplant, he wanted to wait, because with transplant, it's not something you get and then you're good. It's like a transplant, the average life of an organ is like 5 to 10 years, and then you need transplanted again. So he was trying to prolong everything. So he said, wait till you're 30. And so that was the plan. And then it was summer of 2013. I was still 28, and I got an infection where that pump went into my stomach. I got an infection, and they were able to treat it at first, and then eventually my body it wouldn't respond to the treatment, and so they couldn't get rid of that infection. So they said, all right, the only way to get rid of that infection is we have to transplant now. So everything went really fast. It went really fast. Because they were like, we need to get it done as soon as possible, because that infection gets in your bloodstream, and it creates a lot of problems. So everything was fast. I went there it's not where they say, okay, you need a transplant and they put you on the list. It's you go for testing. I was there for, I think, like 3.5 days, filled with testing. And then all the cardiologists from Cleveland, they come together and they discuss your case. It's everything. They talk about your history. They talk about, okay, is she going to be able to handle this? Will she have the support she needs at home type thing? Because there's a lot that goes on with this. And they okayed me. And this was supposed to be like a 3-week process, but it was like 5 days after they said it was time. They called me and said, okay, we're going to be listing you right now. And with an LVAD, you have a 30-day, if you have an LVAD, you get 30 days at the top of the list. And I was, the most common type of blood is O, which most people have. And so there's a lot of people on the list waiting for an O, and they can only receive from an O donor, O blood type, sorry. And I was B positive, so that was in my favor. So they said, okay, and she said, okay, we're going to be listing you now. And I said, what are we talking? Are we talking like weeks, months, years? And she goes, well, you are the first person at the top of the list for the B. If a B becomes available, they call us, and it's not just, like when you think about it, you think, okay, blood type. So they said if a B becomes available, they call us, and then we start matching it. So they match. It's blood type, it's your tissue type, it's a whole array of things that they have to match. And they had said, and my time waited, I was very fortunate, I only waited 5 days, but in that time they said I had received a couple offers that they had to decline because they were too big, and then they went to other people, but I was just listed for 5 days, and they called me on a Monday, and I had just gotten home from work. I'd been home just for a little bit, and my dad was there putting on Christmas lights, and they called, and they told me, we think we have a heart available for you. You have 1 hour to leave, and then this is like 3, I said, I think, and they said you'll go down to the operating room around 8 o'clock. And so I was already packed, I had everything packed, and so we left, and we got there around 6:30, and I went straight back to get prepped, and then they kept it's really interesting, I kept getting pushed back. They said, okay, 9 o'clock, and then it became 10 o'clock, and then I think I was 10:30 before I actually went down, because they were, come to find out, there was also somebody there that was receiving the lungs of my donor, and I believe it was a kidney, so there was a heart, kidney, and lungs all there, and so they were trying to coordinate all these operating rooms, and it takes a slew of, there's a lot of people involved to make this happen. In my room itself, I remember when I was wheeled down there, I had 3 anesthesiologists just for myself, and the nurses, it takes a lot of people to make this happen, so they were trying to figure out all these rooms.
So we knew it was someone was on life support.
Oh yeah, they did say it was because I had the time, because initially they said, we will likely have to come pick you up with a helicopter, because it's got to be quick. It's usually quick, because once the organ is removed, you have 6 hours to get it into the recipient. And so but they said, they did tell me that the person was on life support, so my donor was on life support, so they were able to keep pushing it back until everything was a go. And at 10:30 they did take me down to the operating room, but it wasn't until midnight when they actually started, because they have to, it's not 100% go, they have to, like, the part of my transplant team goes out to the actual donor and looks at the organ. Like, mine was the heart, so they looked at the heart and said, okay, I think it's healthy, it is healthy, it's a good one. And then they call Cleveland and say, it's okay, it's a go. And so Cleveland, at, I think it was midnight, this is all what I've been told. So at midnight it was a go, so they started, and they had to remove all my equipment, which took 2 hours itself to remove, like my LVAD. And I think my heart like arrived at like 2. My dad saw it come in, because it comes in like a cooler, and everything, it's amazing. Everything is very lined up. Like, my dad said that, like, somebody was even waiting at the elevators with the elevator open so they could get it right to where they needed to. And so it was at 2 o'clock, then they put in the heart, and it started beating, and it was working. And then I think the whole thing lasted, because I had some complications, but everything was okay. I think it was 7 hours that it went. It was a 7-hour surgery. But they didn't wake me for a couple of days because of they had to put so much fluid in me. I gained 66 pounds during my surgery of just water weight.
Because they nicked her heart.
Yeah, when they opened me, they accidentally hit my heart, my old heart, which then they had to put me on life support right away, which then I filled up with fluid, 66 pounds. And I wasn't aware of this. When I'm on medication, I'm like out in left field. And so I wasn't aware, but I remember the one day the nurse came in and she was weighing me. They had to weigh me every morning. She was like, wow, you've lost 40-some pounds in like 2 days. And I looked at her, because when I went in, I was very like thin when I went. I was like, oh my gosh, I weigh like 80 pounds, you know? And she's like, no, you gained. And then she explained it all to me, but everything, it went well. And I was there, this is what I find amazing. I was only there 2 weeks before I got to come home. And I came home, I take about 23 pills a day, and a majority of them are anti-rejection meds, because when you are transplanted, your body's reaction is it's a foreign organ in your body, so it starts, like, your body would attack it. So they completely shut down my immune system. So that means I get sick. If my kids bring home anything from school, like, I get it, and I get things like, I say like 3 times worse, like a common cold. If my kids have it for like 5 days, I have it for like 15. Like, everything is in there. They're very routine. Like, I take my pills at certain times, and they expect you to. Like, that was part of my training before I got to come home, is, okay, are you able to go through all those meds and decipher? And I had to put them in boxes, and they had to check them. Now I just know it all in my head, and I can just pull them out of the bottle and take them, but everything is very routine. So I take like 23 pills a day, and that's my only issue is with the medication, because they told me before I left, they're like, it's not if you will have rejection in that first year, but it's when you will have some rejection. And I'm actually 3 years out. I was 3 years out in December 3rd. It was my 3-year anniversary, and I've yet to have any rejection, so that's good. My only issue comes with the medication. The medication makes me sick. If there is a side effect to be had, I would say I have it, like, because I remember my doctor was like, there's like less than 1% chance you can be doing that, and I'm like, that's where my issues come from, but that's a small price to pay. But forgot to show a slide on there, but we'll get to it. It's okay. Well, you can go ahead. I'll show. This was me I was trying to find a good picture. Sorry, all these family pictures. This was how I carried my LVAD. It was in a bag that I wore on my back, and it does, like, all my equipment weighed 7 pounds, which it doesn't sound much, but it's like putting a full gallon of milk in a bag and saying, okay, you have to carry this like all day, every day. It really did take a toll on my body, but we made it. And things with that, I had restrictions, like I couldn't be out in the rain because it's electric. And I had to plug in at night. Like, I plugged in literally to the wall with like a power cord, and if it stormed, I had to unplug from the wall. So I remember my mom was always I'd get a phone call from her if it was like at 3 in the morning if it was storming. You need to unplug, which I usually was already unplugged, or if I would always check the weather before I went to bed. And if I saw there was any chance of storm, I just stayed on my batteries, like for the night. But like it was that cord. That's what was hard. Like the average person of somebody getting this LVAD is 65, and I was 27, so it was difficult with my kids and everything. I think that's what caused the infection. I mean, they were little, so you know, would get caught on things or my doorknobs. And I did that for so long. I remember when I came home, because I would go like this every time I went around a door. I would always like lean so I didn't catch it. And I would say for the first like 6 months, even when I was home after my transplant, when I'd get up from a chair, I'd go to grab my bag, or my husband was like, "Do you notice you still like turn around like every door?" Because I was just used to that. But you can go, the next slide I have is, oh, you can't see it very well, but pre-transplant and post-transplant, you can't see very well, but I just feel like my color was so much better after I got my heart. You can't see it very well, sorry. But just, I saw there's such a difference in my skin color. I finally had a healthy heart. And my first memory when I woke up after my transplant is like how strong. I remember just feeling it, like in my toes and in my fingers. And I could just hear it in my ears, and I couldn't sleep because it was just like, I felt like my whole body was just pulsating. And I first panicked. I was like, oh my gosh, you gave me too big of a heart. And I would constantly be telling my doctor, and he's like, no, you just haven't felt a strong heart in that 18 months when I had my LVAD. But come to find out, recently last year, I found out I did not really have the true postpartum. We found out that I was actually born with this gene, and I just always had a weak heart. And then I was able to get by, because we didn't know. I was able to get by until the pregnancy put too much stress on the heart, and then it fired and blew up into this big ordeal. But so I never actually ever felt what a strong, healthy heart felt like until I got my transplant. And it took me a long time for my body to become used to it. I'd say it was too, I even came home and I sometimes couldn't sleep because I could still just feel it in my fingers and my toes and my ears. And still to this day, I used to I always sleep on my left side, and I can't sleep on my left side because if I lay on my left side, it's just so strong, it beats really strong, and so I always have to turn. But with the organ donation, they are very, they don't tell you anything, just for my recipients. Maybe they don't want to, because I don't know where they're at in their whole grieving process. But they did tell me, the one thing they told me, they said it was a young heart, and, well, I guess two things, young, and they said it was very healthy. And so that's how, because I tried pulling more information from them, because my first letter that I wrote was, it took me a few months before I was ready to send it, because I didn't want to say something wrong, because I would ask them, am I sending this to parents, or am I sending it to a spouse, because I felt like that guided my letter. I felt guilty if it was to somebody that had children. I felt guilty talking about my children and all that. But finally my husband was like, Laura, you said what you needed to say, it looks good, send it. They might just be waiting on that. That's what they may need. So when you do this, it's I can only say my first name. I can't say where I'm from. There's guidelines to it. So I sent it to a place called Life Bank in Cleveland, and then they read it to make sure everything is okay, because they're protecting me too, in case I don't want to respond or anything. But so they read it, and then they contact my donor's family, and they say, okay, we have a letter here from the recipient of your family member's heart. Would you like it? And they did tell me it took them, I think it was 3 or 4 months before they okayed it. And then once they okayed it, then they sent the letter. And I sent one then, because I didn't want to overwhelm them. I think my mom sent one, and then my husband sent one too. And then now I just write one every year on the year, just to let them know that I'm still doing well. And then somebody asked me, how long will you do that for? And I said, I plan on doing it until as long as I possibly can. So every year I just send them a letter, and I feel like it's very redundant. I say the same thing, just thank you. But then what I do every year is tell them like things like I was able to do this year. Like this past year we went to Disney, and so I tell them that, and then just the past couple ones I always like saying there, I respect your wishes, but I would, if you ever need anything from me, whether a picture or, because I can't even send pictures, but I've offered pictures or whatever, but I have yet to hear from them, but I do know that they're accepting them, so I guess that makes me feel good that they're at least accepting them and learning about me. So if you want to go to the next slide. Okay, some of these, with organ donation, I will say it's something I really never talked about. When I was 16, when I got my license, and they asked me, I said yes, and then I remember telling my mom and dad about it, but it was never like a conversation that we had, because I didn't hear about things like that. Now that I've received an organ, I hear about it all the time because people tell me, oh, so-and-so, did you know they needed an organ? And so I think it's something we need to talk about, but some of these are things that I do hear. Like the first one, you can't be an organ donor if you're very young or very old. If you are 18, you do have to have your parents' consent to sign up, and I'll tell you here in a little bit about the signing that process. Or the very old, that's not true. I looked it up, the oldest person who has ever donated their organs was 92. Like the doctors will assess and see if you're a good candidate or not. So don't think you're too old, because that's the doctors. They'll go in and assess you and see if you're eligible to be a organ donor. But then doctors won't, I've heard this several times, doctors don't work as hard on you to save your life if they know you're an organ donor. That's not true. Their first responsibility is to save your life. They don't go and look you up online to see if you're an organ donor and then say don't work on them. Next one, most religions don't condone organ donations. That's not true. I looked that up too. Most major religions are okay with that. If you donate your organs or tissues, you can't have an open casket funeral. That is not true. You have clothes on that you don't see. So you can still have an open casket if that's what you wish. Your family will be charged when your organs and tissues are donated. It is at no cost to the family to donate your organs. And the last one, doctors will take all of your organs even if you only want to donate one. When you sign up, if you go online, you can specify what organs you want. Like I'm going to be honest, when I was younger and I first signed up before all of my issues, I always said any organs except my eyes. I've always had a weird thing. I don't like touching my eyes and stuff, so I always said anything but my eyes. So you can go online if you just want to donate your kidneys or something. You can specify what you want to donate. To the next one. There's such a shortage of organ donations. Like the first one, there's 119,000 men, women, and children who are waiting on an organ, and I think 3,400 of them are Ohioans. Every 10 minutes, another person's added to the transplant waiting list, and then 8,000 people die every year just waiting on an organ, and they pass before one has become available to them. And then you got 22 people die each day waiting for an organ. Then 82% of patients waiting are in need of a kidney. And the thing about that with the kidneys, you can be a living donor. You only need one. A lady from our church just recently, she needed a kidney, and her donor was a living donor. So you can donate one of your kidneys. And the thing about that, because people worry about, well, what if I donate one and then my other one fails on me? If you donate one and if there's somebody down the road, your one fails, you go to the top of the list. And plus, it's covered. Like insurance, the recipient of your first one, their insurance covers any doctor's visits and all of that. So you go to the top of the list if eventually you need a kidney. And then you can donate part of your liver too. Your liver regenerates. And I read too, your pancreas. I guess you can donate part of your, I'm not very up on other organs like the heart, but I guess you can donate part of your pancreas too. It doesn't regenerate itself, but you can survive on just parts of it. And then one organ donor can save 8 lives. And that saving the 8 lives comes from the heart, liver, they can split the liver, pancreas, and then you have 2 kidneys. And then the lungs, they can actually split the lungs. Some people need the double lung, and some people they just receive 1 lung. And then your intestines, and then you can change the lives of more than 50 people. That comes from like your tissues and your bones, and then your corneas too. Okay, the next one. I think that's it. And then so what can you do? Like I said, you can, when you go, like I initially signed up when I was 16 at the DMV when I got my license. When you go to get your license renewed, they ask you, they're supposed to ask you, would you like to be an organ donor? Or you can just go on to donatelifeohio.org and you can fill out the information there, and that's when you can specify what you would like to donate or what you not like to donate. And then the next one, I would say, talk with your family and loved ones about your wishes. Like I said, that was something we never talked about in our family. Actually, I know my dad wasn't an organ donor, and 2 of my brothers weren't. 2 of my 3 brothers were not donors before all my issues arose. We weren't aware of the need for them. And so a lot of times when people pass, then they come to the family, what do you want to do? And then they have to make the decisions. And then be a living donor, like I just touched on with the kidney. You can donate one of your kidneys, liver, and your pancreas. So, okay, that's all of those. So it is something that you need to talk about. So just talk with your family and your loved ones about it. Like I always say, it doesn't just impact the person receiving it, like it impacts everybody around you, all your family. Like I always say, like it affected, my family, like my kids type thing, they get their mom. And then what I'm going to end on is a video that I think is pretty neat, because only like 10% people ever meet up with their donor's family. And so this is a video of a gentleman who received a young man's heart, and he met the mother and the twin brother of the organ donor, and it's pretty amazing. I'll come turn that on. Sorry, I tried to fly through that because I had so much information. This is as long as it can go, so.
You can't cry though, okay? Because then we won't get through this, okay? You can't cry. Oh my God, this is awesome. I love the shirt. My hero. Yeah. It's not a hero. It's okay. It's all right. Really good. It definitely someone who belongs there. I get happiness and sadness all at the same time. Sad that my son's not here, but I'm happy that he was able to help Terry. I think he did. Thank you. Awesome.
I listen to his heart all the time.
Yeah, every day.
Well, that's it. Sorry, I still get kind of emotional about it all, but That was it. And actually what I have now, it's called dilated cardiomyopathy. And they said it was something that's been passed down from generations. Like I said, well, my parents, they don't have any, their hearts are, they get checked and they're fine. And they said, well, it doesn't always like trigger. It's just a gene that's there, and sometimes it stays dormant and never does anything. And then sometimes it then triggers. And with me, it just triggered. And so then that kind of opened a can of worms. My brothers all had to be checked, but they're all fine. So, but it is something that's been passed down. And then there's 50% chance. So my brothers each had a 50% chance of having it, but they're all good. And then my kids, we had them checked, and my youngest, he's fine. And my daughter, she does have it, but she's okay right now. But it is something that's been passed down. But that's, yeah. Is there any questions? You don't mind me. I'm just always emotional. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask or whatever. Yep.
You gotta be one of the bravest young ladies I know so far. If I could ask, that 5 days that you went to the top of the list, could you describe what that 5 days is like?
At first, like you're waiting,
Yeah.
and every time, because I was talking to Cleveland a lot during those 5 days, because there was certain guidelines I follow. I had to stay within a certain parameter of being home, and we had called, and every time I would receive a call from them, it would come up Cleveland. Every time I thought, is this it? Except the time that they did call me, because I was outside talking with my dad who's putting up Christmas lights, and I got a call, and I had blood work that day, so they always called the same day and went over my results, so I thought it was them. But as soon as I answered, as soon as she started talking, it wasn't my normal person, I knew. And then I remember she said, we think we have a heart for you. And then she stopped, and I couldn't talk because I was just overwhelmed with everything that had come so fast. And then she goes, are you excited? And I remember I just couldn't. I said, I guess. And then she like went over everything and said, you need to leave within an hour. But everything was just, it all happened fast. I was hoping it would happen fast, but I wasn't expecting it to happen within 5 days, because there's people that wait, especially with kidneys, people wait years. I think the average is like 3 years for a kidney if you're waiting on the list. That's why so many people look for a living donor. So
There is a friend of ours down by Defiance that he was called to come to Cleveland.
yeah, like I said, it's not 100. When they say we have one, it's not 100% certain that it's going to go through, because something may happen to that heart in the meantime. Like the first time, yeah, he got a call. He had just left, and they called him. He wasn't too far from home, and they called him, and they said it's not a go. So we went back home, and the next day he got another call, and he made it all the way down there. He made it into the operating room, and then it was called off again, because when they went to go look at the heart, something wasn't right. And then it was his third time. Another question people always ask me, like, do you feel differently? Is there anything, differently that's maybe something you have a connection with your donor? I personally do not, but I've heard some neat stories from people. I've met a lot of people that have had organ transplants, and I can say from all the people I've met, like, they've all been very, very grateful. Like, they've just all very grateful. But one gentleman that I met, he had the LVAD with me, and he was transplanted before me when I still had my LVAD, and his wife said all of a sudden he loved to go shoe shopping, and she's like, he has more shoes than I do. And he just recently met his donor's family, and it was a young lady, and they said she loves shoes. So it's kind of just, it's a neat little connection they have. But anything else? Did I miss anything?
The Fort Wayne and Hicksville area to bring forward the Will Graham celebration. Sam graduated from Greenville College with a bachelor's degree in religion and psychology and received his master's from Geneva College. Sam also holds I have no idea what these initials are. Sam can... Oh yeah, here they are. It says Credentials in Christians, Nonprofit and Leaders. It's been a real privilege for me to get to know him. When I first met him and they talked about bringing the Will Graham celebration, the only thing that I noticed was there's tremendous organization through him and his leadership and all the people that he brings with him. So it's a great privilege for me to have him here. Let me introduce you to Sam Hardy, because he'll speak a lot better than I can.
Well, I'll tell you what. I did not expect to come and get the lesson that I just did about herds and cattle and gorillas and monkeys and everything else. So who knew that you could get that by coming for lunch to Hicksville, Ohio? That's a great little takeaway for me. And I'm so appreciative to be here today. It has been such a pleasure to get to know Steve and for him to be a part of the initial work in inviting the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association to come and partner with churches and pastors across the region. And we've got a lot of work that we're setting into motion right now. And I want to share a little bit of that work with you. Hopefully in the context of what does this have to do with Rotary? Because you all are humanitarian-oriented folks. Is that a fair assessment for me to make? Will one person agree with me on that? So I know we're heading in the right direction or not. Okay. This half will. Okay, very good. So we won't talk to these 3 or 4 tables over here. Okay. You are a very service-oriented to your community group of folks. Is that a fair assessment for me to make?
Yes.
Okay. You care about what's happening in the lives of children, youth, adults. That a fair assessment to make? I saw a little bit more head shaking there. That's good. That's good. Well, those are very central and core elements to what we see happen through an evangelistic outreach effort when we work in a community, in a region of the country. And we, obviously, as I said already, we're here at an invitation. It started with a small number of churches and community leaders, and it is continuing to broaden as we're meeting with more and more and more pastors and church representatives. Even in this past week and a half, we've met with over 36 different pastors in engaging them in conversation and just trying to make everybody that we possibly can aware of the opportunity to invest in your churches. That's what we're here to do. Now, I recognize that I can't assume that every single person sitting in this room is connected to a local church. So I'm going to speak a little bit more generally about what we do as well. When someone commits their life to Christ, or I'll even go as far as to say when someone commits their life to any faith journey, but specifically for me, it's about committing my life to Christ, someone committing their life to Christ, it changes their life in a lot of different ways. Is there anybody in here that raised their hand and say, I'm a believer, I'm a Christian? Sam, I'll acknowledge that here with, okay, good. So a good representation in here this morning, okay? How many of you did that maybe as an adult? I committed my life to Christ when I was an adult. Okay, good. Did you begin to behave differently after you made that decision as an adult? You'll smile and you'll acknowledge that, a few of you. Yeah. For many of us, we do. And for many of us, we begin to behave and act differently, not just at home or not just in a church maybe that we now become a part of, but we become different employees. I became a different type of employee when I committed my life to Christ. I can tell you that truthfully. I went from pursuing the corporate ladder and seeing how quickly I could advance and how quickly I could even pull others down who were trying to advance at the same pace I was. I went from, oh wow, is that really God-honoring? Is that really serving others around me? Does that really represent the best for Christ? And I had to begin to wrestle with those conversations and think about, wow, if I'm building a testimony, if I'm trying to impact others for the kingdom with my life, I need to be a little more careful about how I'm conducting myself and how I'm behaving in community and in the workplace. How many of you in here are business owners or business leaders? I see most of you. Most of you are, sure. Do any of you have persons, and I'm not asking you to raise your hands now, just think about this reflectively. Do you have persons that are connected in your business that you would say, yeah, that person's a believer? And it shows in every way in which they conduct themselves. Do you have persons, again, do not raise your hand. Do you have persons in your employment, in your businesses, that you would say, well, they claim to be, but boy, the evidence is a little rough to match up to the claim. Well, I was wrestling with that as a new Christian. I had a foot in the world. I was very comfortable with who I was and what I was doing, very happy with my life until God turned everything upside down. And I'm so thankful that He did, because it did set my heart on a different path and in a different journey with Him. And I did become, I believe, a much better person to my family. I became a much better friend to the people who were friends. And in my workplace, I was able to step back and say, okay, what do I really want to be representing for the kingdom here? Who do I want to be? Who do I want my employer to continue to see? Is this Sam Hardy persona? And it became a challenging endeavor for me to be willing to pull back from that pursuit of the corporate ladder, because I still wanted to be successful in what I did, but not at the cost of tearing someone else down. And it became interesting to me to watch other people looking in who started slowing down and were like, what's going on with Sam over there? Because he's no longer as aggressive as what he was, either with me personally or with me as a fellow department manager, trying to accomplish like initiatives. And so I think one of the greatest takeaways in our work, as we're here to partner with churches and community leaders, one of the greatest takeaways for us is when a mom or a dad, when adults will either recommit their life or commit their life to Christ, and we get to see the beginning stages of transformation in their life, to where they can no longer behave like they used to. That should be a good thing for us across the board, whether we're business persons, whether we love Jesus or not. We should see the value in people wanting to maybe reconcile internally what they're doing and why they do it. All day long, I think one of the best things for community is to have like-minded people about what's best for the community. What's best for the community? And I will trade someone who loves their community and wants what's best for their community. I will trade that over, quite honestly, an ugly Christian. I will trade that all day long. And so for me, as we come into a community and we begin to build more and more relationship and work with the local church, we want to see a community transform as broadly as it possibly can. And the fact of the matter is, there are things that I specifically am called to do in the community that I live in, and each of you are specifically called to do in the communities that you live in, that are different from the person that you're seated beside. Now, you're all here as Rotarians today. Am I using that term correctly? Okay? You're all here as Rotarians today, so you hold that in common. But as, what's your name? The lady in the blue sweater that spoke about the committees.
Michelle.
Michelle. As Michelle, asked you all to consider your committee role, that speaks to the fact that you have different callings, different gifts, different desires to where you fit into this work as Rotarians, and how you can collectively make a big impact in your community, but individually you have a specific role that's cut out for you to accomplish. I believe for me, now living in this region, one of my responsibilities, not just because it's my job, but because I am a believer of Christ, that it's important for me to share who Christ is and why my life walking with Him is important. Because it makes me a better neighbor. It makes me a more caring neighbor in the community that we live in the neighborhood that we live in. It makes me more focused on the needs that are present in a community that I get to help lay shoulder to and meet need exclusive from the church and its functions and its responsibilities in the community. Because that's where I get to work with you all, or persons in my, bustling metropolis of Grayville, Indiana. Talk about a booming little community that we've moved into. My wife and I just moved here from the Charlotte, North Carolina area. Her family lives in the Fort Wayne region, and her mom is aging, and there are some conditions that are beginning to develop, and we moved here to be proactive to help support those responsibilities that we have with family. But I'm incredibly excited as I'm learning about what's going on in your communities across the area. You have a very conservative base here as a whole across the region. That's not news to you, is it? No. Most of you are like, oh, well, of course we are. We're Hoosiers. I want an explanation as to specifically what a Hoosier is before we get out of here. I know, you're not. You're in Ohio. I know, but I didn't say you're Buckeyes. You're Buckeyes. It feels like it's Indiana because it's, 4.2 miles across the state line, so pardon me on that. I'll save that for the next group. But I do know what a Buckeye is. It's that peanut butter-filled chocolate thing. Yeah, see, I got that right. We're just excited to be in community and to be investing in community. And we're investing in children's initiatives, in youth initiatives, and adult initiatives. We want to see children come to know Christ, we want to see youth come to know Christ, and we want to see adults come to know Christ. And so we're helping the local churches understand what their role is in this process. And I gave you a brochure, and if you flip to the middle of that brochure and then move forward one more page to this sheet right here, it talks about 6 ways that your church or you can benefit from involvement in a celebration. I would say to you, those of you that are sitting in here today that are believers, I would say you have an avenue to participating in this celebration that can benefit you personally. You can get involved in this celebration and you can see your own life impacted through some of the training that we're going to do, through the way in which we're going to unite the church across denominational lines. We have more than a dozen different denominations are solidly on board and committing to seeing this work move forward together. And that's a big deal. I don't know how often your churches across the denominational lines gel like that. We expect that number will continue to grow significantly the more and more we go down this road. I think number 5 is a big deal for your community. Christian unity. It speaks to that effort that's coming together as denominations are wanting to partner together and lift up the name of Christ. I think spiritual renewal, number 4, is a big deal when it comes to the investment that we're making in the community. For how many of you can think of somebody in your church that recommitted their life to Christ and really got on fire for the Lord, really serving God, really aligned with what God's called them to do? That type of spiritual renewal, I will take that on all day long as well. If you ask any of your pastors if they're interested in somebody who gets recommitted to Christ, boy, that's usually a very passionate soul and can be engaged to do really great things for your church. An action plan for witnessing. Your churches, many of your churches have lots of people in them that love Jesus, but they're afraid to share who he is. They're not confident in being able to share who he is. And so that's a part of the training investment that we want to make, specifically for students and for adults. There are a number of other initiatives that we're going to unfold as we partner together in ministry. But there are great opportunities for, this work is obviously stretching into Ohio, and it's stretching into Michigan. It's not just about what's happening in Fort Wayne. It is called the Greater Fort Wayne Celebration with Will Graham. We recognize that there's a region here much broader than what's happening in the city of Fort Wayne or the few communities right around Fort Wayne. That God wants to do something extraordinary with. And we're seeing some great things come together very early in this process. So I'm here today to just encourage you to, for those of you that are connected to a church, to encourage your pastor to be aware of this celebration. I have an additional sheet that if you're interested, you can pick up from me on the way out. It gives some very simple next steps for the church. We have a launch event coming up in April the 20th at the Cerruti's Event Center in Fort Wayne. It's the Harley-Davidson building. That's the easiest way for me to describe it, along I-69 and Illinois Road. And we're expecting several hundred people to come together to actually do an official launch of this work. But we're looking for pastors to come to that, and church leaders, and anyone who's interested in seeing this celebration have a significant impact on their community. And business persons in this room, I would say to you, I really do believe, because of my own personal experience, that somebody who commits their life to Christ can become a much better employee for you. They can care much more about the product that you are delivering and their role in delivering that product with a spirit of excellence. So whether that's banking or manufacturing, it doesn't matter. I'm encouraged to be here because this is now my home. And I'm encouraged to see what God's going to continue to do in your region. So, questions. I dumped a few things on it. How many of you are aware of the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association? Okay. Anybody ever seen on even TV what a crusade kind of looks like? You have some sort of bearing for what it is. How many of you think that's mass evangelism? I would. Okay, you'll be honest. Thank you. Okay. The rest of them are trying to see what the answer is going to be. Well, it happens on a mass scale, but it's always been personal evangelism. It's always been about people identifying those around them in their circle of influence that they know that don't know Christ, then praying for, inviting, and bringing them to a crusade, a festival, a celebration, and them getting an opportunity to commit their life to Christ. And then they get acclimated, they get returned to the local church for follow-up and care for discipleship. So there's a whole lot that we're getting ready to unpack in this celebration. But I would welcome any questions that you might have about how we got here, what else we're doing, what's next, etc.
Sam, could you tell us about the celebration weekend itself?
Sure, be glad to. The celebration weekend is 4 programs. It's a Friday night program, a Saturday morning program, Saturday night program, and Sunday late afternoon, early evening program. So 4 programs, October 6, 7, and 8. October 6, 7, and 8. It's at the Expo Center at the Coliseum. And Friday and Sunday are very similar programs, broadly family-oriented. Saturday morning is a program that is specifically geared towards elementary-age children and their families. So it's a fun fest component, a large kind of almost carnival-type environment with bounce houses, games, petting zoo, all kinds of things like that that are attractive to young families to help bring them in as a part of the invitation tool. And then we have a live drama, a 3-act live drama that will unfold and will tell the story of Christ. That will be live actors that will be auditioned and selected from the region, and they will put that live drama on for us. We'll have a children's choir. We would anticipate probably a 200 to 300 children strong, maybe even more children's choir that will be practicing songs and some choreography. So there's a number of different components in that morning, but it concludes with an invitation. And so Will Graham, our evangelist, so Billy Graham's grandson, Will, who's been doing this work for over 10 years now, he will come out at the end of that live drama, and he will give a really quick synopsis of what the children, moms, dads, aunts, and uncles, grandmas, and grandpas, just saw in that live drama. It's called The Greatest Journey. And he'll give an invitation. And it's interesting because every community that we do this in, it's not just children who go forward. Parents go forward with children. Grandparents go forward with grandchildren and commit their life to Christ. And so though it is an outreach that's focused on elementary age children on Saturday morning, it has broader impact up to the family unit. On Saturday evening, we switch gears up a little bit, and that's focused on youth ministry. So that's a night as we've been preparing students and investing in the lives of students for them to also be praying for inviting and bringing their friends that don't know Christ. And then we have a great time there on Saturday night with music that's perhaps a little bit different from what we do on Friday and Sunday, as you can well imagine, doing something that is broadly appealing to a younger demographic. You know, years ago when we started using different music in our crusades and in our festivals, someone posed a question to Mr. Graham to say, Mr. Graham, do you really believe in this Christian rock and roll that y'all were doing? And Mr. Graham said, well, I'll just be honest with you. I don't understand much of what they're saying, but just look out there this evening, because that group does. And Mrs. Graham used to say to Mr. Graham in answering to that question often, oh, it's all right, it's all right. Those guys that come and do that music that you need to know, Mr. Graham sat down personally with and got to know before they ever took a stage in one of his crusades. They're just filling the pond with fish. And then Billy shows up with a rod and goes to fishing. You know, so we use these different mediums and we use these different approaches to reach the demographic of the day. And so it wouldn't work on Saturday night for us to have a choir and expect young people to invite their friends to come and hear a choir. So it will look and it'll sound a little different on Saturday night, and that's okay. We give out earplugs for those who have a problem with it. And then Sunday, again, very much like Friday evening as well, broadly family-oriented in style of program and in messaging. I must have answered every one of their questions, Steve.
Fantastic.
I think I did. Yeah. Thank you again for the time here.